In this episode of Grow Law Firm podcast, Brian LaBovick of LaBovick Law Firm shares his story, how he went from a kid who was ordered by the judge to become an attorney to a highly successful law firm owner with 15 attorneys working for him and annual revenues of over $15 million. Tune in to listen to his message, how he did it, what challenges he experienced along the way, and how he got to where he is, and what you can do to get there faster. Hi there. I have a small but really meaningful favor to ask you. I watch at the stats on our YouTube channel and Spotify channel, wherever most people listen and watch our podcast, and I see that over 80% of everybody who listens to it regularly is not a subscriber. I'm asking you to subscribe to this channel. And the reason for that is my mission and the mission of my team is to help as many small law firm owners to learn how to transform their law firms into better businesses, and so they in turn enjoy better lives. When you hit subscribe button, you tell these platforms that this is content worth listening, worth viewing, and they in turn will show it to many other small law firm owners, and hopefully help me fulfill our mission of helping them create a better business and enjoy better lives. So would you please do me this favor? It would mean the world to me, and hit the subscribe button. And my promise to you is that I will continue to work hard at creating good content with practical ideas that help you and your teams grow better law firms. Thank you. Welcome to GLF Podcast. I have a tremendous guest with me here today, Brian LaBovick of LaBovick Law Group, Southeast Florida, who's been practicing law for over 30 years. And he is the only attorney that I have learned of, ever met, who was actually ordered by the judge to become an attorney at the ripe age, correct me if I'm wrong, of about 17 years, right?
Yes, you are 100% right. The judge ordered it.
You got to start with that story. I mean, how many people have you ever met who, like, the judge orders you to become a lawyer? I've never met anyone but you.
It was fortuitous. I got that order during a traffic ticket, so that was perfect.
Tell the story.
All right, so we're starting off like life history stories.
Yeah.
And I love the story because it really is so near and dear to my heart. My best friend, who is a cardiologist right now down in Broward, one of my best friends in the world, had convinced me in high school that we were both going to be doctors. And I was going through the high school curriculum of AP Physiology, AP Biology, AP Chemistry, like all that stuff. But of course, I was also a reckless kid. I ended up getting a traffic ticket. I fought the traffic ticket. In that traffic ticket in Ohio, they actually had a prosecuting attorney, and I went through a whole trial. Like, it wasn't like here where you're in front of a magistrate referee. The trial's like very informal. It was a literal trial in a courtroom with a prosecutor, and they called the officers. And during that trial, something clicked, and I started writing down questions, and I cross-examined the officer, and I really stepped up. And I'm sure during parts of that trial, I didn't do great, but during cross-examination, during closing, and the spirit of F. Lee Bailey took over. So I ended up winning that trial. At the end of it, the officers admitted that there was a sign out of place. Probably wasn't a great thing to give me a ticket. It probably wasn't right. So she ended up giving me a not guilty verdict, a female judge. And afterwards, she asked me and my mother, because my mother came with me, to go back into her chambers. So we went back into her chambers, and she sat down and asked me what I was going to do. I'm here. I'm a high school kid. And I said, I plan on going to med school. I'm going to, go to college. I'm going to, I only thought I had one choice, to be a doctor. My mother told me, So she said, no, my friend, you are going to be a lawyer. What I saw you do today with that cross-examination, a young man, your possession of the language, your ability to articulate your position, really exceptional. You have to do this. And honestly, while I was there, it felt right. So from that moment on, I wanted to be a trial lawyer. I knew I wanted to be in court. I thought I wanted to be a prosecutor. So I ended up being a prosecutor. I ended up being a prosecutor for a couple of years. But then I wanted to be a civil justice lawyer and enjoy trial work and also help people and make money.
You've been doing this for 3 decades, give or take?
Yeah.
And how long have you had your law firm for?
I started the law firm in 91, October of 91.
Got it. So going on 34 years. We're recording this in January of 2025.
Yeah.
Amazing. Now, here's what stands out about your law firm. Most law firms never cross the threshold of having 10 attorneys working there. You're well past that threshold. I think your roster is about 15 attorneys working for you.
We're 15 lawyers now. Yeah.
15 lawyers. A very uncommon success. I think this is like top 2% size-wise, give or take. So the probability of getting there is slim. It's not none, but it's slim. But you did it. Tell the story. Like, how did you go from that zero when you started in 91 to where you are today?
It's interesting because it's such a general question. So the truth is, I'm a slow learner. I'm clearly a slow learner. It took me a long time to feel comfortable or get good at being a business person instead of being a lawyer. I was very convinced that my path to growing a law firm and doing well in business was just being a good lawyer. And so I had these ups and downs in the law firm where we went up to 4 or 5 lawyers, and then we would go down to 3, and then we would go up to 6, and then we'd go down to 4. And I kind of grew the law firm pretty organically to about 4 million, give or take $500,000, 3.5, 4.5, right in there, for about 10 years in a row, maybe 15 years, if you count all the kind of really bad economic years in the late 2010 era, like 2008, 9, 10, we had that giant economic downturn. And at that point, if you were to look at the trajectory of my career, I started off as a prosecutor. When I went out on my own, I actually purchased another guy's law firm. So I came to Jupiter and I purchased a firm that the gross income, the year that I purchased it, the year before I purchased it was $33,000 gross.
Revenue. That's total revenue for the year.
Total all in. That's all the guy made. I purchased his law firm. That included a secretary. Why?
Why did you buy it?
I'm an idiot. Because I'm not a good businessman. That's like, I don't know. There's really no real rational basis for that.
Sure.
So this is what it ended up being. It ended up being a pretty good deal. He had a book of business that was there. It was all over the place. He had will contests and he had commercial stuff and he had real estate closings and one personal injury case. He had a secretary in place. He had 2 computers and he had floppy disks at the time. I don't know if you remember what a floppy disk is, but it was this like big 5.5-inch, and you'd stick them in. And so I record things and we would trade them back and forth between the 2 computers. So I bought that practice and it got me up from where I was as an attorney down in Miami to where I am now, which is in North Palm Beach County. Put me in a really good location and kind of a growing young city. Gave me kind of a basis of like, okay, you got a couple clients. It had some revenue to it, not much. The best thing that it had was a Yellow Page ad, which I never would have invested in because I didn't believe that it would work, but they do work, or they did at one point. And so I inherited this little dollar bill Yellow Page ad that was driving in revenue every month. Like, it worked. And so when I met the Yellow Page salesperson, and he convinced me to make the ad big, it made more revenue come in. And so we just recognized early on in kind of a fortuitous lesson that you could build a practice just based on advertising. So I kind of went through the Yellow Page growth phase of my life. Interesting story. I'm still friends with my Yellow Page salesperson, that same Yellow Page salesperson, and we share hockey tickets for the Panthers now together. So we've been friends since that time. The guy who took over my account, and Yellow Page is gone. Like my original one has retired, and my second Yellow Page salesman, who I met like 2 years later, now works for me. So I have a penchant for loving my Yellow Page salespeople, I guess. But anyway, so we built the business based on that construct of advertising Yellow Pages, growing it, and then growing a base in Jupiter. And so it went really well, like, starting from that very early time in like 93 or 94. And then for about 10 years, it grew to that $3 to $4 million mark and 4 lawyers. We had a nice little office space in Jupiter. Everything kind of was moving in the right direction. And
And
I
you were
thought we're going
doing,
to
at
make,
that time, you were doing almost $1 million in gross revenue per attorney.
yeah, yeah, it was pretty much what we were looking for. We were looking for
Perfect.
about $1 million in
Yeah,
gross
perfect.
revenue per attorney.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, and I was doing it. So I was counting on my caseload to bring in, my caseload would bring in somewhere in the 1.5 million revenue, maybe even 2 million in a good year. Some lawyers would do 800,000. I had a partner at one point who like was doing 1 million, and then he did 600, and then he did 400. And I was like, look, I'm kicked him in the rear end and had to be like, look, you either have to step up or step out. And then he did 1 million somehow. So sometimes I learned, keep people accountable, management theory. Not very good at that as a like natural ability thing. So that all went really well. And I thought I was a really hotshot business guy because we were highly profitable. We were doing great. I was living in Jupiter. The town was wonderful. I had a great family. My partner is my wife. And so she's, having a great life because we started having kids and that was all going in the right direction.
Was it her revenue
And
that went down to 400,000 and then you had to
she's
kick
not
her?
the one. She's not the one. So that's funny. Um, so I got ahead of my skis is the truth. And I've told people this before, like hubris sets in and you think like everything you touch turns to gold, and it's not true. And so we were into a bunch of property. We were into houses. I bought a big house on the river for $2 million. I didn't sell a house on the intercoastal for blah, blah. Like it was just over my skis thinking that the revenue was never going to stop. And the music stopped in like 2008, and I had a building and I had an apartment and I just like was way out over it, and it crashed, and it was really hard to figure out what to do next. So I didn't honestly handle that well. I I turned and instead of doing what I should have done, and I can tell you what that is, but what I did is that I opened the doors to anything to bring in revenue. And we brought in real estate, we brought in commercial, we brought in like all the island of misfit toys of lawyers who couldn't find jobs, or lawyers, like anything to drive revenue. And it was really panic for about 3 years. It was in this crazy panic mode. I brought somebody in to manage the firm who was a terrible influence, who created terrible culture. I mean, just really awful stuff. And uh and so it wasn't for about 4 years during that turn that I realized a couple of things. Number one was I didn't have control of my culture anymore. I went out to lunch with a good friend of mine, Steve Polisiner, who is in ESPN radio. He runs all the stations, and he talked about why they were doing so well, why Good Karma Broadcasting was just growing and expanding and had such good things. And it was all based around culture. And he goes, you need to get back a hold of your culture. Like who are you and what are you doing and where are you headed in your firm? And so that was one person that helped me out. Another person that helped me out was in a group that we had called AWE, which is Attorney Wellness Exchange. So I'd go to this attorney group and we would talk about health and wellness. And another lawyer in my community who also is a personal injury lawyer, he said, are you still handling a caseload? And of course I was handling a caseload as well as managing. And he said, you're not going to be able to grow your firm unless you like get rid of the caseload and start managing and learn how to manage and take some management lessons and read more management books. And so that was a really, really good advice piece, moment. And then I had a really good friend of mine, Jeff Boyd, who was running annually we had like an annual retreat for the firm. And I said to him, will you run the annual retreat? He did it like 2 years in a row. And he goes, nah, I don't want to do it for you anymore. And I was like, why don't you want to do it? It's paying him money to do it. It was, every year. And he goes, because, it's frustrating to watch you like do all these annual events and then never get anywhere. And you're not going any place with your firm and you're not doing anything that we talk about. And I just don't want to be with somebody who doesn't want to change. So you can run your firm and be happy or be sad or be whatever. But I don't want to pretend like you're going to change and you're not going to change. And I said, what do you want to do? And he said, I want you to hire me to be your consultant for a year. And I want to set you up so that you understand your business, you understand where you want to go, and you go someplace. And I was like, wow, okay, I don't want to do that. So I waited a year before I hired this guy, I wasn't ready emotionally, And then we set up a leadership committee, and I had to learn and understand how to manage well, and I had to get really in touch with myself as a leader of the firm, which I was kind of hedging on. And I wasn't leading, I was just kind of directing. And I was directing a bunch of different people doing similar things. So I kind of made the analysis with my leadership group of who we were, what our vision was, what our mission was, what our core values were. I set out a 10-year plan on where we were headed. I set out a 5-year, very specific plan on every single year, what we were going to do. I put a lot of work and time and effort into it. And I brought everybody together, and I provided this day-long charting of where this firm needed to go and be, and who we needed to be. And we all kind of gathered around that, and we rallied. And it was at that moment that I went from a 4-lawyer, 5-lawyer firm that was doing 4 or 5 million a year to, over time, now growing to a $15 million firm doing $15 or $20 million a year, depending on where we're headed. So it was the moment of clarity on understanding what the culture was going to be, what our vision was going to be, driving a very clear mission, and having core values that people had to uphold and be a part of. And it's been an interesting process. So I think that when I talk to people about how to grow their business, a lot of people have jumped into the law thinking, oh, I'm going to be a criminal defense lawyer, I'm going to be a this lawyer. And they start off really good because that solo years, 2 people years, 3 people years, 4 lawyer years, you get to this threshold from 5 to 10 million is like the danger zone. It's really hard to run a firm. It grows out of control. Your expenses go crazy. Your systems aren't developed. You don't understand how to run a P&L. Lawyers are not trained how to read a P&L, how to run a balance sheet. So these are all lessons that you need to really get in touch with, unless you had great business training, which I was a philosophy major. So that didn't work too well for me. So it was a lot of hard lessons. So I learned, like I said, slowly, but now I think we're in a really amazing place, and we're growing, and it's been such a great lesson. I still honestly have these moments lamenting that I'm no longer the trial lawyer. I do want to get back into the courtroom some days, and I know it's available. I'm just afraid that if I turn my attention away from being the business owner, it'll hurt the business. But yeah, that's the story.
It's an incredible story with a few elements that are highly atypical, especially to younger attorneys. But starting off by buying a law firm 30 plus years ago, that was so rare. So
Yeah.
that was it is an uncommon decision today. It was way less common back then. I've been in business since early 2000s, 2001. Even
Yeah.
like 24 years ago, it was very rare to buy a business, let alone a law firm. So started off right, and then you scaled up to $1 million per attorney 20 plus years ago, which today most law firms cannot touch that number. Cannot touch that number. Most. Not all, but most law firms cannot touch that number. Most law firms, I see it. 300,000, 400,000, 500,000, 600,000, and this is where it gets really difficult. And past 600,000, it's rare for law firms to exceed that. So
I don't know what a lot of other law firms actually do, because I don't think that people share the truth of finances very well. So yeah, we can be $1 million per law firm, but if we're spending $1,200,000 per attorney on advertising, it's not a good law firm.
Sure,
and I've
different
done that
side of the
before.
equation. But you say that you're a slow learner, but you've done a lot of things right, like figuring out that Yellow Pages actually works. And at the time, Yellow Pages was the primary vehicle for attracting business.
Really was.
You got a bigger ad, it gave you a bigger top line, more revenue. A bigger ad, more revenue. Obviously, things have changed dramatically since then, but then it worked incredibly well because it was the vehicle for attracting business. And I talk to a lot of law firm owners, and the numbers are very, very, very atypical, even for today. Very atypical for today. Yeah. So congrats on that tremendous success. And the way you got there is, well, first you focused on bringing in that revenue, then got ahead of yourself, overextended on so many things, learned some very hard lessons. Sounds like they were incredibly difficult. And then 4 years later, you focused on the culture, shifted your focus away from practicing law to actually managing the business, which another such an uncommon step for a law firm owner to take. Most law firm owners are just practitioners through and through. 50% of their time is spent practicing law. Another 50% is spread all over. They do marketing, they do intake, they do management, they do HR, like anything and everything.
Yeah.
So, but you focused. You made that shift, and that pivot is just really hard to do. I
You got to
know
make a
that
choice.
it's a hard choice because you feel like you're really good at this. You have been doing this for a really long time. Nobody can do it as well as you can. And if you replace yourself, it is an additional substantial expense because you're good at what you do. So whoever is going to replace you is going to cost considerable amount of money.
Yeah.
So a lot of good decisions were made there, and I think at times you weren't giving yourself enough credit when you said you're a slow learner. It's been a long journey, but you've been very successful along it with some downfalls here and there. But I think it happens in every business owner's life, every life, period.
Yeah. I have a high pain threshold, I think. So it all worked out.
Aren't you also into martial arts, or am I confusing you with someone else?
No, it's interesting. I was when I was a kid. I
You were.
boxed in
Yeah.
college and I
Yeah.
did Taekwondo. My daughter is now competing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Good.
And so that's kind of my new attachment is watching her compete. So
Yeah. So high pain threshold, which is very
grit.
important for any business owner because like our advisor, we have a few advisors. My top advisor, my favorite advisor, he says, a business, any business, is like a living organism. It's always sick with something. Your
Yeah.
job is to be a good doctor, diagnose the illness, and fix it to move on to fixing the next illness and the next illness. And he's like, it's par course. It's very natural. So you have to have that pain tolerance level where you're like, you can always tolerate some pain because it's never perfect. And if it seems like it's perfect, it's very temporary.
Yeah.
Very
It's
temporary.
100% true. It's 100% true. I tell myself that. My father was an insurance agent, and so I grew up with a lot of great lessons from the sales perspective, right? So he had me or trained me in sales early on. So I would canvas for him and I would run sales and I would set appointments and then he'd go out and sell people. And then when I turned 18, he got me my insurance license. I went and got an insurance license in Ohio. I sold nursing home supplement policies to pay for college. So he had me out selling all the time. But he would always say, direction is all important. Position is not relevant. Just keep your direction good. It doesn't matter what position you're in. Don't worry about it. Just keep your direction right. It will work out. So I always, if I'm down, if I'm in a bad place, I'm like, all right, how do I turn the direction so that we're headed in the right direction, right? Like northeast, always be going northeast.
Mm, a lot of wisdom there. Brian, let's imagine that today is not January 2025, it's January 1991. You're 34 years younger, you're starting over again. How do you make this thing to $15 million? Way faster than 20, 30 years.
I think I would have been more. First, I would have set down at the time. So it's interesting. At the time, I knew. So would I do it different on what I know? I think I would have codified in a document what I knew to be true to who I was. And so when you were talking about the $1 million per lawyer, the reason that we were $1 million per lawyer is that the person I am or wanted to be was the guy who pushed the insurance company to the maximum limit on every case that we could possibly touch. Like I really took great pride in the fact that I would love to try anything and all. Like I just wanted to try cases when I came out of school. After that first trial when I was a kid, I begged to get back into the courtroom. I went through college, joining anything I could do. I went through law school, joining every competition. I was order of the barrister coming out of law school, which is only 2 people or, so I came out, I went into the Justice Department. I didn't go into the state attorney. I went into the Justice Department. I had 200 trials. Like, we had a lot of trial work, right? So we did a lot of that. And I came out wanting to try cases and push the insurance company hard. And so who I was this guy who wanted to fight. I like the fight. I boxed in college. I wrestled in high school. I like the fight. And so I had this construct of, I want to be the fighter. I want to be the gladiator. I want to be the warrior. I want to be the samurai, whatever you want that mythical person in your head to be. And I wanted our firm to have that culture. So when I was young, it was our culture because it was just me and whoever I was working with. I had a partner for a number of years, and we were like 2 sides of a coin. I could be the mouth and the aggressiveness and the person who wanted to be in court, and he was the substance with all the nitpicking details that I didn't want to worry about. And if I needed a document in trial, it was there without me having to ask for it. We just had a very good rapport. And so that all worked for a number of years when we were small. But as you grow and people come on board, right, it gets a little bit harder and a little bit harder, and you bump up against this threshold of how many people will stay on board when you don't have a mission statement and core values and a vision of where you're going, right? So people don't really know. So you say, we're going to go charge, and one guy charges that direction and one guy charges this direction because no one really understands the charge. And then to make matters worse, of course, when it crashed and I brought in real estate and, whatever else, now we're totally off mission, right? So then there's nobody in charge. So the key for me, if I were to go back and do it, would be to codify who we are, what our mission is, and to be more aggressive about specializing in higher value cases. So instead of just taking like whatever accident cases came in, which are very good cases, etc., I would have specialized in just truck cases. I mean, Joe Freed has built a firm on truck cases only that is spectacular, right? We've got, Elise Sanguinetti in California, brain damage baby cases. Wonderful, wonderful things she does for people. And they're big cases. The biggest case I've ever had has been a brain damage baby case, a very severely, unfortunately, hurt child, but a very, very large case. So I think if I were to do it again, I would be doing more of that specialization early in my career instead of just trying to build a business.
So codify who you are.
Yeah.
And then really focus on one thing instead of dispersing your attention across so many different things, focusing.
Yeah, they call it the Hedgehog concept, I think, in the Good to Great book and some of the other management books. I'll get really good at one thing, get known for one thing really well, do plane accident cases, do international terrorism, do, children getting hurt, do sexual abuse, pick something that turns you on, something that you can feel. And I'm talking as a guy who wants to be a civil justice prosecutor. But if you want to be a real estate attorney, my best friend coming out of law school was a real estate attorney. And when we graduated, he got it. Like, he knew. He went to big white shoe firm, Steele, Hector and Davis. And I was like, so what's your goal? And he said, to be really competent, right? I want to be a really competent transactional real estate lawyer. And honestly, right now, he is probably the number one reputation transactional real estate lawyer in Miami. He has more business than he knows what to do with. He had business all the way through the economic downturn. People flocked to him for quality. He's never put $1 into advertising. He barely has a website. I think he might have a website now. Like truly like a guy who's like, they just keep beating down my doors for the quality of my work. He's got a great little firm, super, super profitable. But he knew what he wanted and he got really good at it. So whatever you want to be that. But know who you want to be. Let people know who you want to be. And don't chase don't squirrel, as they say. Don't chase bright, shiny toys. Like, make a decision, codify it, write it down, know what your values are. If anybody you ever employed does not have your same values, please remove them from your team.
Practical standpoint, how would you get to from $0 to $15 million in a hurry? How would you attract that business?
I think that the best way to attract that business would be, I don't think that you'll get it through advertising. You might get it through very concentrated social media efforts, going on to social media and developing your identity, and then working that identity through attorney referrals. Because with that specialized capacity, with the right branding and the right effort, you're going to start picking up those cases quickly. And I would do what it takes to let people know that you're serious about it, which would mean, in my world, trying the case, right? So you need to find the case that you want to do, and then you need to do it, and then you need to publish it, and then you need to let everybody know that you do it better than everybody else, and then you become the person doing it. A good friend of mine, one of my best friends, Sean Dominic, who just got done being AAJ president last year, a number of years ago now, pushed an issue against the testing companies, the blood testing companies, right? So it was cancer screening. A woman went in to get cancer screened. She ended up getting misdiagnosed on the cancer screen as not having cancer. A year went by. The slides were clearly cancerous. She then found out she had stage 4 uterine cancer, ovarian cancer, and she died from it, right? And then the family sued, and he brought a case against the drug screening company, and no one had won that before. Like, no one had been able to show that a prior slide that was bad, and they threw the world at him, and he never backed off from that, right? He made a huge investment, time, effort, money. He killed himself to make that case happen. He won that case. He got a huge verdict in that case. The court cut it down, and they remitted it down to something like super low. So then he set it back for another trial, because it's the only way to get over a miniature. So then he was going to try it again a second time. And then they capitulated finally, and they gave him something that I can't disclose because I don't know, because it was confidential. But I know that it was big. And from that moment forward, Sean has been inundated with spectacular medical malpractice cases. So, he could have in 2 or 3 years just made that, had he done it early in his career.
Knowing who you are, focusing on what you really want to do. And the third thing, I think this one is very important, big-headed determination.
Yeah.
Don't give up.
Yeah.
Go for the win.
Give up. Don't give up. If you believe in it, don't give up.
What sustains you during more difficult times?
My identity, my core identity, is that I am my wife's husband and my children's father. So my core identity is my family. I have this, when I was in college, I had this picture that I cut out of a man holding a child, right, with his head down like this, just holding this child. And it represented the construct of a dedicated family man, a dedicated father, a person whose priorities were his family. And that was who I wanted to be. My father was that way. And so I wanted to be that person. And whenever I've been in a terrible situation where we've been hanging on by our fingernails financially, because that's happened, I thought to myself, if it turns out that we fail for crazy reasons or whatever, my children are healthy and my marriage is solid, and it won't matter. It'll be okay. It's just money. We'll make more. And so that sustains me, that concept that I've got a great marriage and a great family and great children, and the Lord has blessed me with healthy children, and I'm just grateful for that, and it makes everything else okay.
What a touching and wonderful message. Thank you so much for sharing
Truth.
it with the world.
Yeah, it's just my truth.
Yeah, I can see it in your eyes that you actually live it. So
I'm trying.
That's awesome. Brian, thank you. It was an honor to have you on the podcast, sir.
It was so nice to meet you, and this is a lot of fun. You're a good interviewer. Really, truly, thank you for everything.
Thank you.